All right. Boss in tow. Got the boss over here. Gonna check my every word.
That's right.
Police my every thought.
I will edit.
Dot every I and cross every T. So, this is going to be part 3 of this ongoing discourse on physicalism, baby. Is that how sexy is that? A discourse on physicalism, baby.
Wow.
Well, I had ended part 2. I'll tell you. I don't know if you saw it or not. I had done a quickie, like a 15-minute or so, like part 2. He said quickie. Yes, he did. On part 2. So I'll just I put it out online, put it on YouTube. I just had it. I was going between projects and stuff, and just like had a little thought and kind of got it out there. Where I ended it was this, and that's where I'm going to pick up now, because it'll be good to bounce ideas back and forth. I was talking about how, physicalism doesn't, when people are into the secular physicalism, they pride themselves on uncertainty, and, too much so sometimes, like in a postmodernist way. And I've got videos on that where it's like, well, there are things that we can be certain of certain things. No pun intended. We can be certain about some things. And then there's a heck of a lot of things that are just uncertain. Like we can be certain about aware experience, for instance. This will take us back to Descartes. I am, I exist. We're certain that this perceptual experience exists. When he says, I am, I exist, I think, therefore I am is how it gets translated in a dumbed down version. But what it really means is, I am, I exist. In French, that's how it's written in a scholarly discourse. Makes a lot more sense. And then the public meme is, I think, therefore I am. Which doesn't quite go as deep, but anyways, this is certainty. We can find there is an so we have to treat consciousness as an absolute. Physicalism doesn't have that. There isn't anything that absolute. They're not looking at it that way. So they're on uncertainty. Well, physicalists had been complaining to me, why are you so darn certain all the time? Are you uncertain of anything? And that's what I was speaking to. And I was like, you're not paying close enough attention. So I quoted Joseph Campbell. He who thinks he knows doesn't know. And they were accusing me of that. But unfortunately, the second part of the quote, he who knows that he doesn't know, knows. I'm the one telling you the effing quote. Obviously, I know that ultimately we cannot know, and we can't know everything that there is to know, in other words. He who thinks he knows everything there is to know doesn't know. He who knows that he doesn't know everything that there is possibly to know is the one who is knowing. But then we're asking the question, what's more? I was trying to just always ask what's more. Does it end there, or is there more? Well, what I found there with everyone for the discussion is what's more is that there's even in the situation where we know that we don't know everything or can't know all there is to know, there's still some knowing involved in that. We know our own personal limitations as human beings, right? I'm going to run this by the wife. Yeah. So that's where I left off last time. What do you think about, you want to come back at that, or is that too much to come back at fast? There's some knowing involved in the fact that we can't know everything. Right. We know that much. Yeah. So it's knowable. It's possible for humans to know that much.
Yeah, the only thing I would take issue with, personally, is that I think it's even more like maybe we we know we have limitations, but sometimes I think we don't actually know what those are.
Okay, so that I think I touched on that too.
Yeah.
It's a term that people have heard in the media or like government people say. There are known unknowns, and there are unknown unknowns. In quote. Like so. Like when they're talking about other countries or whatever, intelligence. I think that was an intelligence statement, like a governmental statement.
Mm-hmm.
But it can apply to philosophy, science, and mysticism too. So I'm going to take it there. Yeah, and then again, there's some degree of knowing.
Mm-hmm.
Like we know that much. We know that there can be unknown unknowns.
Right.
That we things that we don't know. But we know to look, I guess, to anticipate or to consider or to think about.
Mm-hmm.
To think about the fact that you have to consider unknown unknowns. In a way, doesn't that... I mean, we don't know exactly what they are, but we know to think about them.
Right.
So they're known in a certain way.
Yeah.
They are known somehow.
Right.
Even though you don't know exactly. Like, let's say an unknown would be like maybe some extraterrestrial technology or species or something that we didn't even know to look out for. But then again, we do, because we just said it.
Right.
You know?
We know to look
That's what's more.
out for the unknown, because we know that the unknown exists.
So, in this interplay, I mean, when I say all dichotomies break down to false dichotomy, that just happened just now. Like by exploring and asking the question, what's more? What's more? It brought about a situation where there's no dichotomy between known and unknown. You know, they're just so interwoven. Because the minute we start trying to, this physicalist was trying to push me into unknown unknowns as if that's it. That's as if uncertainty is the absolute stuff. Yeah. But you're never going to get away with certainty within uncertainty, you know? Known within the unknown, you know? There's still some known factor, even because they brought up unknown unknowns, thinking that they were going to pawn the discussion and win somehow. Because look, the ultimate is unknown, but you know that. And they couldn't wrap their mind around that. I gave up explaining. I started trying to, and that person that I'm talking about could not wrap their mind around what I was even saying when I said we know to consider unknown unknowns. I lost them at that point mentally. So I mean, I was like, okay, well, if you're trying to school me on mind, you know, you just got schooled then, didn't you? And they don't even know that they got schooled because their mind doesn't understand what I just said. You understood it immediately, but you know, we're of higher cognitive personality types, and there's reasons for this. You know, she's an INFJ and I'm an INTJ. We understand these things by nature. We can get into this stuff. People who are of the higher cognitive personality types can understand these logical scenarios and these deep thinking situations, but you know, not everybody can. It's a minority of the population. The idea is to spread the wealth and some of this knowledge stuff. Everybody ought to know. It shouldn't be hoarded away or tucked away in a vault or like kept in some secret society or whatever. You know, that's my thing, is that a lot of this stuff should be known by people because it does society a benefit for people to be thinking ahead as far as possible all the time. I mean, my thing is, this is not about like intellectual arrogance or anything. It was an arrogant intellectual that came at me with the uncertainty issue about unknown unknowns. They were being arrogant. They were trying to pawn me in an intellectual match, and they got pawned in the process. You know, and I'm like it's like a legal advertisement or something for the people. I'm doing all this for the people. For God's sakes, I don't want it to be locked away in academic ivory towers. I want people to understand this kind of logic on the street. I was making the point that for this kind of thing to be, for people to think like that and always be thinking ahead, the world would become a much better place if that were the case on individual by individual by individual. Pretty soon, you know, people could think things out of ways. A lot of the conflicts that go on today would die off. They'd just dissolve. A lot of unnecessary conflicts, right? Because like we're talking about conflicts like within our music, within our bands and stuff like that, between members and people. If what I'm talking about right now had been the case, people would have thought 2 or 3 steps out further, there wouldn't have been an argument. There would not have been a misunderstanding. There wouldn't have been a bunch of ego investment in it. There would have been okay, cool. And like in negotiating and hashing things out. Because everybody's on the same page, just like we were. When I just said that thing, we were on the same, oh yeah, I get, yeah, I see, yeah. Unknown unknowns, we know that, sure. That's logical. That makes sense. We can just have a discussion. There wouldn't be, what could we argue about, you know?
I guess it depends on the goal.
Yeah.
You know, do you have the same ultimate goal? So like in your music, what's the goal? For one particular individual to stand out above the rest, or for as a group that you guys, you know, put out the best music that you can? And if anyone deviate, you know, so if you don't have the same ultimate goal.
Yeah, but I think thinking that goes back to thinking out ahead. You know, if people are I think what it is people are not thinking out ahead, so they don't have that goal-driven thought process that you mentioned, and thinking ahead would solve that a bit. You know? Yeah,
I think so.
And be like, well, what's the goal? Ask the question, what's the goal here? But anyway, so with physicalism, I was just kind of I've been going over some things that are wrong with physicalism. So. One thing is that physicalists think they're going to pawn somebody by mentioning unknown unknowns, and I've just made that clear that won't happen. If you think it'll happen, you come to me, you're going to get just deflected right off with what I just said. There's something, you have to know it. So this is the argument where somebody would try to agnosis over or prior to gnosis, or trying to prioritize agnostic philosophy over gnosis. And that's what this argument was born out of, the Gnosis group on Facebook. Over 200,000 members. It's one of the bigger groups of the spirituality genre. And oftentimes agnostics will come in there and try to pawn Gnostics or people that are into Gnosis in general. That will fail them. They'll never get rid of the Gnosis aspect for this reason. So this applies to physicalism too, in the question of what's more. That was one strong point I wanted to make. And then I was trying to look for some other examples of like what's further than where physicalism has its mind. Like, you know, its mindset to me is an idea, as moving on to idealist philosophy, which is greater. It's a greater outlook. It explains more. It thinks out ahead further. That's the biggest problem that I have with physicalism, is that I'm thinking further out ahead of it, so it annoys me. I couldn't remain a when I started out thinking organized religion, I had to leave it because everybody else is stuck in some mindset that I've transcended and moved further beyond. That happened to physicalism too. I just studied it until I got to all of its limitations and its inherent problems, and then graduated beyond that to personal spirituality, I'd call it, you know? Not organized religion, being personally spiritual in your life. And to me, that's a graduation beyond both organized religions and also secular physicalism. That's what I've been speaking to in these talks. So I talked about how nobody gets away from the eternal principle, because even in the physicalist models, there's a singularity. There's no birth of the singularity. The birth of the universe starts with an already existing singularity that has no explanation. A singularity exists, and then the birth of the universe. What is it, eternal? It's just there, you know, and then you go into all this stuff, and then that led to people thinking deeper and then coming up with the multiverse. Well, then that's eternal. It's an eternal physicalism doesn't get out of the eternal principle, and they're poo-pooing God and all this stuff. Well, meanwhile, you have your own God. A physical existence is your God if you're a physicalist. It's the eternal. Physicality is eternal. But then there's problems, infinite regresses and stuff, and you can't locate an irreducible factor in the equation. You can reduce. There has to be an irreducible ontological primitive, or you get stuck in infinite regressions forever. So then, what's more? I'm going to keep talking about what's more. An idealist philosophy is what's more. Infinite regressions are just concepts and perceptions in primary awareness. You know, aware experiences things like infinite regresses. So it's what's irreducible about an infinite regress is the awareness that perceives and mathematically or conceptually conceives of any given regress. Turtles all the way down is an appearance in fundamental awareness. Now at this point I've lost a few people, and because it sounds like I'm making a literal like a linear model by this is prior to this and whatnot, they don't understand. They think that the assertion is that a linear one, when it actually isn't. We're just doing that to explain something. I say no. It's co-eternal. So if we're talking about the Gnosis and Agnosis, you realize we can't get away from the two of them. They're always there, both. When we try to get away with the unknown unknowns, Gnosis is there. You know that. You see, they're co-eternal. This is beyond physicalism. What's more is thinking about things as co-eternal. The reason that all dichotomies are false dichotomies is because all twos are co-eternal. And they all break down to the eternal one, perceiving as if there were two. This is what's beyond physicalist reasoning and thinking. And the problem that I've had is that traditionally in modern times, it is secular physicalism that is granted the title of intellect, as if that's the benchmark for mind and for intellect. And it's not. It's not by a long shot. This type of deep spirituality and mystical realization that I'm speaking to from direct experience is the apex, is alpha, is the aleph in Hebrew. That's what that represents. And it's mind. That's why God, as a symbol, it's supposed to be a symbol. And it symbolizes the eternal principle. And nobody gets out of the eternal principle. Secular physicalists, as I've just demonstrated, do not get out of the eternal principle. Everybody has an eternal principle. And it's going to be known eventually that everybody has to have an irreducible ontological primitive, which is the eternal principle. Everything reduces to it. It is everything, and everything is it. That's the deeper insight. This is what goes out ahead of physicalism. And I'm kind of speaking to this because there's a lot of people that are doing like what I did 23 years ago, and they're stepping out of it. They're realizing that secularism is unsatisfying. That it doesn't tell it's there's more. There's something more than just this, but they don't know what's more. So I ought to go out and just say it out loud and let them know, like from somebody who has a lot of experience, including direct experience of non-local awareness. I know what it's like to lose the awareness of finite mind and be into the infinite mind, and then come back again to finite mind to understand the differences in perception and try to describe them. So what this all amounts to is experience. And what I see online is droves and droves of intellectual and spiritual bluffing, droves of inexperience presenting itself as if experience. This, I see it everywhere. So that's why I'm speaking to these things. You know, I'm going to speak to them, and I'm going to put them online, and anybody in the world could find their way to it, even though obviously what I'm saying isn't popular. But it's there. And if it's there, it's possible for people that might need to see it. So I'm going to keep it going. More later.